swap. And there are many forms of interest rate swaps. They have plain vanilla ones, they have a little more complex, advanced ones. So let's start with a very basic. Let's say party A, one company, has a $100 million loan and pays LIBOR plus 150. As you know, LIBOR is the London Interbank Offering Rate. It's a floating rate that changes, especially if it's a 3-month LIBOR, which is the most commonly used. LIBOR is a 3-month corporate LIBOR. LIBOR today is about 2.75, almost 3%. So party A pays $100 million loan to a bank. Okay, very straightforward. The bank lends them $100 million, this company, and this company has to pay LIBOR plus 150 for the next 5 years, whatever the loan. Let's say 5-year loan. Okay. Now this company, this party A, I call it, which is a company A, a little worried about interest rates moving up. Why? Because if LIBOR goes up, then it gets more expensive, the loan, right? If LIBOR today is 270, let's make it 250 plus 150. So they pay 4% now a year. So they pay $4 million on a $100 million loan, $4 million a year. But if LIBOR goes up to 350, so now it's 5%, they're going to go from a $4 million to $5 million, $1 million more, and that might be a little bit too costly for them to be able to access, to be able to actually access capital to continue paying. So in this situation, you have a company that is very nervous that rates will go up. Now, there are 3 ways that can fix that. Of course, the first is to refinance it with a fixed. People do that all the time. So forget it, feeling bad. I'm just going to take this loan and refinance $100 million, get a new loan at fixed rate. Problem with that, it could be expensive because maybe they just did this deal a year ago. Maybe paying that off could be some penalties, which we've seen before. Or getting a new loan, you have to pay upfront fees, points, and all kinds of, it's very expensive fees-wise. So that might be a little more expensive to just refinance it out. Another way of doing it is to go to the futures market that we just discussed last week. And basically, buy long interest rate index. Buy the LIBOR actually. So if you buy the LIBOR index, let's say LIBOR is 250, you can lock it at 250 in the future, right? So if it goes up, you can actually cash out on your futures. The problem with this is such a big amount, 100 million, it could be a big amount to find how many contracts to do that, and usually they don't give you long-term 5-year contracts or even a year-to-year contract. It's very expensive. You have to be on top of it. You got to continue renewing your contracts on the futures, so it could be a little bit more problematic. It works when you do 3 months, quick LIBOR, or 2 months, or 6 months. And the third option is to do a swap. So you go to a swap house, it could be a bank, okay? I'm going to put this in the middle, guys. So this is like a clearing house. I'm going to call it a swap house for now. And you tell them your problem. And the swap house, I have a solution for you. Okay? Continue paying the LIBOR plus 150. We don't even have to tell the bank you're doing a swap. We're going to do some kind of so-called notional amount. I'm going to explain that. Notional amount to cover your 100 million. We're going to get to a contract between the swap house and party A. I'm not going to even bring party B yet, because party A doesn't know about party B. But the swap house has to find another person, party B, to make a swap. But I'm going to stay away from that for now. So let's assume that these are the guys that want to do a deal. So I said, hold on, I have a solution for you. I'm going to pay you LIBOR plus 70. I'm going to pay you LIBOR plus 70 basis points, 0.7%. Remember, this guy's paying, they continue paying LIBOR plus 150. So you're going to continue paying LIBOR plus 150 to the bank, okay? But I'm going to pay you LIBOR plus 170, and you have to pay me back a fixed rate of 865. I'm going to call this a swap rate. I'm going to look at this again. So immediately it fixes the problem. I'll tell you how it fixes the problem. What is party A paying? Let's do the whole formula. Party A pays LIBOR plus 150, pays. He receives LIBOR plus minus 70, of course you can do this way. He receives, so he offsets, right? And he pays a fixed rate of 865. So let's see what happens, how much they pay. They pay, let me just take the parentheses out. LIBOR 150 minus LIBOR minus 0.70 plus 865. L's go away, so it offsets the floating rate. And if I do the calculation, 150 minus 1.70 is 0.80% plus 865. So they're going to be paying a fixed of 945. So no matter what happens to LIBOR, if LIBOR goes 2.5%, 3.5%, because they pay that here, they receive LIBOR. Once you receive LIBOR and you pay LIBOR, they offset each other. So net, they pay fixed at 945, no matter what happens. Now, of course, it sounds like a 2.5% LIBOR, 150 is 4%. Why you want to pay 9? Well, these guys are worried. Maybe when the example was there, LIBOR was 5% or 6%. But they're worried LIBOR is going to shoot up to 8, 9, 10%. So they want to fix the 945. So that's one way of fixing it. Now, the swap house, they're not going to take that risk. They find another party. I'm going to call it party B. And let's say party B pays to the bank a fixed rate. Let's say a fixed rate of 925 on a $100 million loan. So the swap house says, look, this party B has a problem. It has a view. They think the rates actually are going to stay low. And if it's only 250 LIBOR plus 150, it's 5%. There's no way I'm going to continue paying 9.25 fixed. I'd rather pay the floating, take some risk. So even if the floating goes up every year, it will never catch up to 925 because the rates are not going to move that much. That's the view. So now they want to go to the swap house and get a floating rate. Of course, as I mentioned to you, there are 3 types of choices for them. First is to refinancing out. So refinance, right? Refinance the floating rate and get fixed rate. I refinance the fixed rate and get a floating rate, plus whatever. Second is to actually go to the futures market and short the floating rate. so it can cover their fixed, as I mentioned last week. And third, swap. Of course, as I mentioned, all three choices are doable. The first one could be expensive because you have to refinance the debt. Could be this debt, could be have some call provisions. If you don't know, we did it in the bond class, meaning that if you retire early the loan, you could have some penalties. So it'd be expensive for them to retire the loan. It could be also additional fees getting a new loan. So this might be very expensive to just refinance out, to take care of the fixed to floating. The futures market is another way of doing it. You do a notional futures in the future, you short the floating rate, so if the rates actually go down, then you can actually offset your fixed. The problem with this, if it's a $100 million notional amount, it sounds like a big contract. Second, I don't think you can go very long on the futures. You might do 6 months, a year, but if you have 5-year loan, if you have to renew it every year, so if you renew every year, the rate changes, right? We're going to look at some of that in a few minutes. So the swap idea is a good idea. You call the swap house and give them the problem. Of course, the swap house loves it because you found someone else has a different view. That's why we're swapping the cash flow. So what they do, I say, no problem. Maybe the swap house doesn't want to lose any money. They don't want to take any risk. They have those numbers. You can pay LIBOR plus 70. So they're going to pay LIBOR to the swap house, and LIBOR will give it to the party A. So it's going to be a floating, right? Nothing happens here. And the swap house will pay back 865, which is the swap rate. And fixed. So let's see if we've solved their problem. Remember, they want to stay low. They want to pay LIBOR. They want to take LIBOR risk. They don't care. 925 is too much for them. So let's look at the equation. They still pay 925 to the bank. That's not going to stop. But they receive 865 fixed from party B. Okay? And they have to pay LIBOR plus 70 basis points. So plus LIBOR plus 70 basis points. So if you do the calculation, this is 35 plus 25. We're talking about 60 basis points, 60.6% plus LIBOR plus 0.7. So now it's LIBOR plus 1.3%. See that? So what happens now, they took care of it. They took LIBOR risk, which that's what I wanted, because LIBOR is 250. So they love it. Their payment went from a 9.25 down to 5%. And if LIBOR goes up to 6-7% next year, it's fine because they pay 9.25. And they don't think LIBOR is going to go up. So both parties took care of their problem, what the view is. Okay? So this is, now the swap house didn't take any risk. Because, if you think about it, the LIBOR plus 70 basis points comes from the plan B. They take it and they pass it to party A. Party A pays 865 to them, and they give it back to them 865. So the swap house is just a clearinghouse. Now, how do they make money? Could be two ways. Maybe they charge LIBOR plus, they get LIBOR plus 70, and they give this LIBOR plus 65. So they keep 5 basis points for them, something like that. Usually I don't do that. Or they charge a fee to each party to do a deal like that. I'm not charging a 1% fee up front for this notional, or maybe half a point or a quarter point. Depends how the company, how